Let's get started. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. So basically, none of us are blind to what Agile or what Scrum is. Every one of us practice it at certain capacity, but this is more about to know why we are doing something that we are doing, and that will help your business analysts, PMs to make you understand what they are trying to ask you to do, and why they are asking you to do certain things, and basically why we ourselves are doing those many. So I've been talking to many of my current and previous teams, and certain friends of mine like Kiran, Bala, etc., who have their own teams who practice Scrum, but however, they aren't very sure of why we are doing certain things in the way that we are doing. So, some of my friends asked me for some gyan around it. So, um, you know, I started something in this area of explaining people about some history behind Scrum, the whole SDLC life cycle, and then connecting it to what we are doing now, and then in this process, in this path, answering any other questions that you may have, or taking some examples from your day-to-day work and how we can better them, etc., etc. And feel free to stop me anywhere in the middle if you have any questions. And even after this session is over, I'm just a ping or a call away, and many of you who are working with Kiran already know me, and you know how to reach out, etc. So, right. So, all right. So we'll get started, and as I said, feel free to stop me anywhere. You don't have to wait till the end of the discussion to ask any questions as well. Hope my screen is still visible. You're able to see my screen.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yes,
Very
yes.
Great. So, as you might be knowing, some of gray-haired people like Bala and me, we already know these, but some of you who started your career recently. So, in 1960s is when actually using computers for a lot of our day-to-day work started. Prior to that, it was primarily into NASA's of the world, ISRO's of the world. But after that, around 1960s is when originally it started with big pile of machines, and one big box containing 2 MB, 3 MB of space, and every KB is very, very, very valuable for people at that time. And that's when people used to code and deploy, as in put that box and then fix if there are any issues. And these things started happening, and when we find that um, not a lot of things can happen ad hoc, we need to put some serious thought process before actually we code. That's when in 1970s it evolved into design code, test and maintain slash fix, whatever. That period is in 1970s, and 80s is when waterfall model uh, became very famous. And even a lot of us these days who claim that they use Agile still follow waterfall a lot of times. Um, we'll get into those details if at all there are any further questions on waterfall model. But waterfall is about how water falls from the sky. So you just start with the design. Design is complete, then you code for years together, then the coding is done, then you do the testing for months together, and then deploy it. And it was working very well in those days, when there were lesser projects, lesser people who are aware of it, and lesser awareness in terms of an issue being an issue, right? At that time, it was fine, but then people started to understand the usage of computers more and more, and then people started writing better code and reusable code, etc. And this waterfall uh, turned into smaller cycles, and it was called as a spiral method, but still it was following the same design, code, test, and maintain methods, but in a smaller cycles. But 2000s is when agile methods came into picture. So I'd say agile, most of you must be knowing, it's a big buzzword and probably one of the most abused words, so to speak, if I can say. So uh, agile, most of you are aware of. So agile is more of a framework. So what is that framework? If you go to agilemanifesto.org, which is the um, uh, you know the forum where you can understand what agile is, what is the um, reason behind coming up with some framework called agile, is there. So that website itself gives you this information. So as the word suggests, agile is basically a dynamic, a fast moving, or a never ever changing methodology where software can be developed. So now in this process, in this framework, what we are being advised to do. See, hear my words carefully. We are advised to do, which means it is a recommendation, but nothing is a rule by book. So, whatever we are doing today are the best practices that we are understanding from the market leaders, and then we are doing it. But all of them, all of the agile methodologies that we follow have suggestions, have they have frameworks that were built that are suggested to be followed, and everything can change as per your need, and that's why it is most abused, so to speak, right? So basically, if you see my screen, the leftmost words are on the bigger font, whereas right side words are on the smaller font side, because while we are giving a lot of value to processes and tools, for example, the individuals and interactions are far more valuable for us. When it comes to a trade-off, we will trade off process and tools for individuals and interactions. So these are more important for agile to work in the way that it works, right? So similarly, a comprehensive documentation is absolutely needed, but then working software is the primary goal, and it is a lot more important for us to follow. So basically, if we have to compromise a little on the documentation to make the software work better, so be it. So just go for it. That's all. But nevertheless, don't ignore anything on the right. um, right, yeah, right. So I have some confusion about left right combination, but yeah. Contract negotiation, customer collaboration, following a plan versus responding to change, these are all similar, but look at the words very carefully, that those are the words that are very very important, and you can relate to what you are doing. Whatever you are doing today, you can absolutely relate to it. Responding to change, know, your business analysts or PMs come back to you saying, this is an additional change that is needed, and in the next immediate sprint, probably those get prioritized, and others get deprioritized as well. So responding to change, following a plan is very important. You all do sprint plans, you all do release plans, etc., etc. But then let's say something like a security issue came up and you need to do some encryption of your sensitive data, PII data, then probably that becomes a lot more important, lot more priority than compared to the release plan that you had. Release plan can always change based on the stakeholder requirement. Right. So basically, with these Agile Manifesto principles that were suggested, that were laid out there, there are many software Agile software methods came up. Software development methods following Agile came up, and every one of us knows Scrum. Many of you may be knowing about a lot of other frameworks as well, but Scrum is something that is followed more than 50% across the globe. Out of all the Agile methods that we have, these are some of the methods, but there are a few more. However, they are not used very frequently, and hence I did not put them. But Scrum is one thing that is used a lot because of whatever reasons. We'll go through Scrum in detail, obviously. But uh, any of you have heard or worked on any of the other frameworks and want to talk about it? Anyone used Kanban, for example?
One guys.
No. So,
Tarun, I think Tarun dropped off. Okay. Yeah, I think some of the team members are using that currently in one of the projects.
okay, great. Yeah, so then lean software development, which asks you to fail fast and show it to the customer on a probably on a day-to-day basis or a weekly, twice, thrice basis, etc. as well. And extreme programming, which is about driver navigator method, where two developers work together. One of them becomes the driver who actually writes the code, and the other person becomes the navigator who looks at the code and suggests changes. And after some time, they switch their places. So just like me and Bala going on a long drive, and I driving for some time, and after that I give my steering to Bala, but he doesn't know how to drive, so I have to drive continue. So yeah, but yeah, other person should also know how to drive. Only then we can do the driver navigator method using extreme programming. Then there are few more like crystal development framework, dynamic system development, and FTD as well. But most used is Scrum, and I'm assuming that most of you are already using Scrum. So we will focus on Scrum and understand what we do, and probably in that course of action, we'll also try to understand why we are doing certain things in that way. All right. So basically,
just one query. So there is a chance of utilizing multiple methods which you have depicted right in the last slide. So you can use Scrum framework along with Kanban and extreme programming, right? So can we do that?
Actually, yes. As I was telling you about this Agile framework. It is about a dynamic way of executing software development lifecycle. So nothing that Scrum tells you that you should follow the same way. It is a guideline. It is a principle that you are advised to follow, but it's not absolutely no if you don't follow as well. So you can as well mix the approaches, and probably if that is not yet mixed and created as a new framework, probably you can come up with your own framework and say that this is another agile framework that I'm coming up with. So, for example, lean software development is part of some parts of Scrum, Kanban, and extreme programming is all put into lean, and it has come as an entirely new agile software development. So if something is working well by mixing 2-3 different ways of doing agile, as long as they are following these principles, you have a new framework that you have designed. Like that.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Cool. Thanks. Yeah, please continue.
Yeah. So we all follow Scrum big time, right? So we come with our product backlog, a list of items that we want to deal with. Basically, many of the engineering graduates know what backlog means very well, right? So yeah, this is absolutely the same. The papers that we want to clear, the items that we want to clear is what is product backlog. And from that backlog, what are the first 2 papers that you want to pass in the first year is your sprint planning, right? And then in those first 2 papers that you want to clear in this year, what are the chapters that you want to cover first, and what are the most important questions that you want to read and memorize is your sprint backlog. Am I making sense? Right. So and you work as a team to read, not to write the exam but to read, and then you pass the exam. That is your increment. Only you passed 1 paper, so then you understand how it went well, why the other paper failed. That is your sprint review. You will get to know your sprint in your sprint retrospective. You will get to know that okay, these kind of guides and books helped me, and these kind of books did not help me well. So then in the next set of papers you will actually follow that plan and make your plan better and go for your next set of backlog clearance. It's similarly our product backlog. From the product backlog you pick the items that you want to cover in a particular sprint, which becomes your sprint backlog. And out of the sprint backlog, people pick the items. Who are the people? That team is called as Scrum team, and then they understand on a day-to-day basis what is their progress. Whether most importantly, anybody can tell me what is the need of daily Scrum?
So daily Scrum basically consists of
Okay.
what was done yesterday and what the team is going to do today, and to address any blockers, if any. So ideally it should, that's why it's also called a stand-up, because it should not last more than say 10 minutes or something, because you're supposed to stand during the meeting. So it needs to be short, but it basically is an overview of what the team members have done yesterday and what they are going to do today, and address any blockers.
Yeah, great. What is daily Scrum? Great, but why do we need daily Scrum?
To monitor and to assess. So basically in waterfall, the reason is that once the a requirement is fixed, you're not supposed to change it. But a daily Scrum is required to know if there has been a change from what the earlier agreed upon functionality was.
Okay. Anyone else can give it a shot? Definitely not to pinpoint someone who is not working. Definitely not. That's not the intent, right? So why do we need daily Scrum?
to know the status of work, as Dinesh said, and also to guide the team if there are any blockers or also any hurdles that the team is facing. All these includes in the Scrum, which makes the project work moves faster, as well as yeah.
True. So basically, two things. One, daily Scrum, as you guys are rightly mentioning, it allows the Scrum Master and at certain capacity product owner to resolve any blockers, obviously. And the second is the most important, probably, if I were to put it, I probably give more weightage to this, that you get to know the failures fast. So fail fast is a most important value that daily Scrum brings. So if something is stuck, something is not working, some dependency is there on some other team, or let's say some deliverables are getting delayed, you get to know about them much in advance rather than waving your flag at the end of the sprint. Sprint is nothing but that small increment. The output of the sprint is called as increment, right? As you can see in this thing, right? So if something is impacting the increment, you will get to know in the daily Scrum in much at a much advanced stage, um, than knowing it very late, and probably it may not be corrected. Instead, it may have to be only postponed. But and believe me, 99% of the times, or probably I can say 100% of the times, clients are absolutely okay to move the dates by here and there, as long as you tell them in advance about the reasons of the failures, and mitigations that you are taking not to repeat it. So then everyone is absolutely okay. The sky is not going to fall. So everyone is absolutely okay as long as they are informed of any delays, informed of any surprises, much as in any delays, basically. If it is informed at the advanced, at the later stage, it becomes a surprise, and people don't like those. Whereas if you are informing it in much in advance, then people are absolutely okay, right? For example, if things are moving slow, and one sprint we understood that there is a problem, then there is a chance for us to rectify those via sprint review and retrospective. We'll be able to rectify them and pick up the pace. So that way we'll be able to correct ourselves in no time. And the other way to put it is, even if something goes absolutely wrong with respect to requirements and translation of the requirements and whatever third party reasons, etc., still people are okay if you are informing them in advance. Making sense?
So Shiva, is that like identify failures well in advance and then reassess the timelines of the deliverables and then inform the clients? Is that the
Yeah,
right understanding?
right. So basically, in general, this helps you to identify the um, failures in advance. That is what we
Okay.
call as fail fast. So that will help you to correct yourself in your next sprints, and then probably you may be able to hit the same timeline without any issues. That's one advantage. But otherwise, also, even if the changes are too many, and continuous requirements changes are happening, and there are blockers and dependencies, etc., it's still fine, because you are informing on a regular basis to the client about what are all changing and what are all the reasons that are happening. Then everyone is absolutely okay. So daily Scrum, which is a very very tiny thing that you do, probably for 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but this gives a lot of visibility into what is going to be delivered when. It gives people a sense, and that will help people to set their expectations accordingly. Right. So, and as I mentioned earlier, sprint retrospective is a very important piece which will help you to understand these problems, these smaller problems, and find a way to mitigate them well in advance. So in this sprint, probably something did not work well. Probably using your sprint retrospective time well, you'll be able to plan certain things much in advance. For example, certain stories, if you see, probably they are getting moved into other sprints regularly on a regular basis. For example, let's say some AWS issues or uh, GCP issues are coming up and you are not able to move forward. So, if continuous issues are coming up, then probably time for you to escalate it to right stakeholder at the client, and then get these sorted. Or else, if they are not able to sort it out, they are aware of what is happening, and they are not surprised that something is not going to come to me by end of this particular release. Right. Moving on. So basically, what are we doing in this is that our product backlog, we are dividing it into smaller parts, which we are calling as sprint backlog, and then Scrum suggests you to do your plan your Scrum for 2 to 4 weeks, which is a smaller set of things that you are going to develop in that 2 to 4 weeks. But again, it is a suggestion. So in my career, I have seen teams having 1 week sprint. I have seen teams having 5 week sprints as well. It doesn't stop them from doing it in the way that they want, but typically what works best is anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks. Typically 2 or 3 is what people do it the most, but yeah, it's up to the team to decide what is best for them, right? The meeting is about daily Scrum, and as someone already mentioned that it should be a very quick one. What was done yesterday, what is going to be done today, and any blockers, and vice versa. Basically, depending on the time that you have your stand up about, it may be about what I have done today, what I'll be doing tomorrow, and any blockers. So that would be a simple agenda for this daily Scrum. And we just try to understand what is the advantage of daily Scrum, right? So then, so that is what the output of the Scrum is always. As you can see here, it is called increment. Increment, by that word itself, you can understand that it is a small additional piece that you can push to production. Hear me out. You can push to production. It doesn't mean that every end of the sprint you have to push the code to production. It is a potentially shippable code. Some teams, some Scrum teams, they actually put these increments aside, and probably in 3 months, once in 3 months, they push the code to production. It is still okay, absolutely fine. So what is not okay is that you keeping that increment in your in your warehouse, in your data store with you is not okay. So either customer or the customer rep should be able to see your increment in action, whether it is in production, whether it is in your test environment, whether it is in UAT environment, whether it is in production by switching on a flag or off a flag. You should be able to show it to your end customers, or a representative of the end customer, to validate what you have done. So after every scrum, the increment is being shown to the customer or not, is a very important question that you should be asking to yourself. And if not, it is not actually getting the value that it needs. You are not actually utilizing the power of scrum very well, right? So you have to show this and get the early feedback. That is how you get better at scrum. And if imagine you implement these increments, keep those in your um, um, at your place, at your GCP, wherever, without showing anything. After 3 months, 6 months, you show everything together to customer. It is as good as waterfall. Though you are calling yourself agile, but you are not getting that early feedback, and that feedback is not getting looped into your development cycle, and hence it is continuing to be a waterfall or a spiral, for that matter. So basically, what we do, right? First thing is product backlog, and we do the grooming. So as when Kiran was talking about we having some session um, at sales earlier, we have had this design thinking session. So design thinking is all about understanding the backlog. You know, it is like combing your backlog. Your backlog could be a real mess with a lot of inputs, with a lot of ideas coming in, with a lot of people explaining it in different ways, and coming up with different theories that it would work, this wouldn't work, etc., etc. So you actually have to comb that and actually make your backlog look like a real product backlog, and then that is what you are going to put into your sprints. So understanding your requirements clearly is very important basic step. A lot of times this has to be done in collaboration with the client, and client users especially, not the people who has the power of check, right? And definitely they may add value in terms of decision, but people who use the system, they are the people that give you lot of value in terms of grooming your backlog well. So you have to understand the personas, the kind of people who are going to interact with the system, or who are going to be benefited from the system, and empathize with them, understand their pain points, and then different strategies are there in design thinking. You have to do a big workshop on its own to understand what is happening today, what is as is today, and what it would look like if you were to change it. What is that to be, right? So design thinking workshops are the key for understanding the pain points to the at the right level. And the another buzzword, that digital transformation, and that is another big abused word. So basically, digital transformation needs design thinking big time. Otherwise, we will not be able to understand the requirements themselves, right? Pain points, and everyone has pain points, but what is the priority? Do you really want a particular mobile app to be you to be able to log in and place your order, versus some fancy stuff like multiple doors and multiple options to place your orders. So depending on the priority, you have to work on the backlogs. And importantly, every software that we build comes with assumptions. We assume a lot of things about the persona, and we have to call them out. And if the assumptions are wrong, then what are the risks associated if the assumptions are wrong? Similarly, goals are the ones that if this software is implemented, um, what are the goals that it is going to solve for the persona, and non-goals are nothing but future goals. It's not like they are not goals, but they are not immediate goals. Somehow they coined the term non-goals there, but that means future goals. Right. So this is more about backlog grooming. As I mentioned, this needs a session on its own about design thinking, but it is more about empathizing with the people who are using the system or who are going to benefit from the system, and then understanding the pain points and prioritize them and come up with what needs to be done. This is more like um, you know uh, uh, combing your hair after your head bath, so something like that, right? So then Scrum team comprises the three kinds of people: development team, Scrum Master, and Product Owner. For the lack of better term, they call it as development team, but that doesn't mean only software development, but it includes dev, QA, DevOps, platform, whatever teams that are impacted by, or whatever teams impact that particular story, um, are part of the development team. Scrum Master and Product Owner, I think most of us are very clear. Scrum Master is about understanding the project status, and making sure that impediments are resolved uh, or escalated. Um, Everything is not in the control of Scrum Master as well, right? So Scrum Master has to uh, try and resolve the impediments, but in the case that it is not in the line of control, then probably you as a Scrum Master, you need to escalate it to the right people and get it sorted out for the team. So development team or the Scrum team relies on Scrum Master to get sorted. So if uh, team members are talking about a lot of impediments in the um, daily stand-up, that means that Scrum Master has a lot of work. And Product Owner is about understanding the uh, problems that the development team has while implementing it, and get them clarified. Either uh, clarify them or talk to the client and get them clarified for the team. So these are few things that we I think are good at what we are doing. In general, Scrum teams, they know what their um, you know work is, what their capacity is all about. But what is that we generally miss is here. Actually, um, I'm I'm still audible, right? Just to check.
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Most important thing um, that is missing for a lot of Scrum teams that I have seen so far is the definition of done. So there are multiple types of definition of done, DOD as you call it. One is a definition of done for the story. When do you think that story is done? When do you say that the story is done? That is definition of done. And the definition of done for the sprint, and a definition of done for the release. So at various stages, definition of done has to be defined upfront, and then everyone follows it. For example, let's say teams define that the definition of done for their user story include, for example, unit tests. But then people write the unit tests, but they never look at whether they are getting executed properly and whether the unit test coverage is more than designated percent, let's say 60%, 70%, 90%, whatever they define for the team, whether that is touching or going beyond that number or not. These are very, very important for the development team. A lot of times people miss defining it or adhering to that definition of done. So team together sitting and defining it will help them to understand what they need to do to complete a particular story, and it is like a checklist for you, right? And looking at your definition of done, you can say that yes, 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 I have done all of these, and this is not applicable for this story, this is not applicable for this story. Yes, I have ticked all this. So then that means that your definition of done is very clear. And a lot of times I have seen teams defining their definition of done for all stories in a almost the same way. Still, it is okay instead of not having a definition of done, but ideally every story should be having DoD. 1 second, I think charging. Yeah, so and then the sprint goal, the achievement of the sprint goal is obviously the increment, is related to the increment. So defining what is the piece of functionality that you are going to make it ready, which is a shippable code, is another important thing that you have to define upfront, right? So these are a couple of things that people don't pay attention to, but probably the most important even before you start practicing Scrum or Agile. Right, so if there are no questions, probably we can get into the responsibilities of the dev team, so that we understand what we are doing and why we are doing these as well.
I think Dinesh has raised his hand.
Yeah, go ahead, Dinesh.
So Shiva, this was related to like you were talking about backlog grooming. So I was just curious that like you had mentioned that the features or something which has to be incorporated into a product should mostly sometimes also come from those who are using the product on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to know that like there are external stakeholders who also have a say in those requirements. So in terms of your backlog specifically, like for Big Basket, did you see some changes being forced upon once Tata acquired Big Basket in terms of the way the product backlog changed or something like that?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So so for example, for people like Big Baskets or Chromas of the world, what happens is that a lot of requirements come from business teams,
Right.
and the marketing teams who study the market and push that information to the chairman's chamber, right? A lot of these come from top down, and
Right.
a lot of times we get into the discussions of what is the value of a particular RFP, request for proposal, right? So any RFP that comes onto the table, we generally get into a discussion of why are we doing an RFP or a RFP? What is the ROI, return on investment of that RFP? How do we measure the success, etc.? And then a lot of times our product backlog goes for a toss when it comes from chairmen or the board of directors, etc. But it is all for the good. Basically, the changes are asked because market is changing. For example, we had a big plan of launching Fresho stores across India. And we worked left, right, and center, morning, evening, weekends, etc., and build a big piece of functionality that supports not just big basket ecosystem but also the Fresho stores. Yeah, stores, physical stores, like more
physical stores,
more are this Reliance Fresh, something like that. Fresho stores, which are vegetable and FMCG items that they sell in. But then, as you know, Zomato and Blinkit were taking over the market with these
in the same space, right?
With these 10-minute deliveries, we have seen some sharp decline in our sales. Though our overall numbers, as in the value of the cart did not go down, but then the number of orders we have seen going down. So we had to do something to catch up with that, and hence we came up with BB Now, which has come all of a sudden as a big priority, and we have put down everything else, put aside everything else, and worked on BB Now first, and
sorry, BB Now, is it that kiosk for every society? I think that is BB Now, right? Or that is different?
That is different. That is BB Instant. BB Now is under 30-minute delivery for customers. It is probably there in 300 plus locations already. I'm not here to market about BB, but just to give you an example, that BB Now became a lot more important line item for us in our.
So Freshos took a back seat mostly now,
because at that time, and immediately after BB Now is stable, we took up Fresho again, and I mean, almost it was done. Actually, 90% of the work was done, but still it was put on the back seat. But after this BB Now was done, then we started with Fresho store, and right now I think we already have 20 plus stores already launched. And I've seen myself in one of the stores, and traffic is huge. People traffic is huge. So yeah, it is also working out well. So basically, a lot of different priorities would come, and because of that, product backlog would change, and that shouldn't matter for the Scrum team, because they work in that 2-week cycle or 3-week cycle, whatever that you follow, and that will definitely not going to change much in that 2 weeks cycle, and your PM and your Scrum Master are responsible not to change it much in that particular 2 weeks time. But after that, let's say from next sprint, put everything aside, start working on this. Yeah, let's go. Let's start with reviewing the product spec, writing the technical specification, and then working on the design, and then start working on the new features / new services, and put them onto different environments, and you go boom. So yeah, things definitely change a lot, not just at Big Basket. We have seen at multiple places. Even when I was handling the dev analytics team at Red Hat, our features, our requirements were changing too drastically. A lot of times in the middle of the sprint, people come and ask us to drop it, and then let's go with the new functionality as well. So there are changes that happen every now and then. But Scrum team shouldn't be worried too much, because their team, that their goal in that sprint goal or the increment that they are working towards wouldn't change for that sprint much. However,
Right.
whatever you are
Okay.
planning to do in the next sprint might change.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that was my question. Okay. Thank you.
So basically, as I said, the first point we just talked about definition of done, right? Listing down functional requirements, what are the non-functional requirements and the quality requirements. You have to be very clear about defining it. A lot of times, people write a list of items for a particular release, that these are definition of done. Some parts of them will be taken and elaborate and put them into a sprint definition of done, and for every user story they add few more points and define the definition of done for that particular story as well. So some teams write it as acceptance criteria. Some people write it as a definition of done. Some people would just list down that this is the requirement. Nevertheless, we have to cover the point that when do you think, when do you say that this particular story is considered as complete. That is what is definition of done. That is the most important thing, probably untold truth, that this is the most important thing that we miss a lot of times. Yeah, I think we talked about a lot of these already, and yeah, I would say we can skip these. If you have anything specific in here, we can talk, but yeah, we mostly covered these. So basically, we'll get into the actual day-to-day work a bit. So we work on epics and stories as user stories, as we know.
Hey, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. One question. If you go back to the chart that you had.
This one?
No, one. I think the chart with the circle and different. Yeah. So you have the sprint review, sprint retrospective, sprint planning. In your case, do you have these ceremonies done separately with one another, or do you overlap or interlap with one another?
So typically sprint planning happens, I mean, as in, again, it's a best practice that sprint planning happens day or 2 days before the sprint starts, because by that time the current sprint related items, we have a lot of clarity whether they are going to be done or not, whether there will be spillovers, etc. And most of the things will be cleared by that time, and hence a couple of days before the new sprint starts, the sprint planning happens. And sprint retro happens typically 2 days after the sprint starts, the new sprint starts. For the previous sprint, we do the sprint retrospective. So is that the question, Kiran?
Yeah. So do you combine the sprint review also with the retrospective, or is it just two separate ceremonies?
Typically, sprint review is done at higher level. Basically, for me, for example, all my teams related sprints, PGM comes and reviews it with me and the EMs. Whereas sprint retro is primarily among the team members. Generally, sprint retrospective, it is recommended that managers and above do not attend. That way, team, a Scrum team is considered to be self-sufficient, and hence they should be able to come up with their own items of improvement, line items for their improvement, and then implement them. To start with, maybe to coach them, etc. People, the leadership people can join the retros, but otherwise retros are, because if leaders are there, then probably people may not be able to come up with the required or entire recommendations because of whatever known reasons. So
Yeah.
and hence retrospective generally is among the team, and sprint review is primarily with the leadership team, to understand what happened in that particular sprint. Whereas sprint retrospective is about how can we make the sprint review better next time. So retrospective is futuristic, and sprint review is actually what happened, to understand that. Sprint retro, as you can see, sprint retro is an input to your next sprint planning and backlogging.
Okay.
Okay, all right. So moving on. So just a quick time check. Yeah, I think I'll be covering epic and story, and probably estimation execution. So yeah, probably I can finish it in next 10 minutes or so, and any further questions we can ask, we can take up again. So epic, this is one kind of a format that probably after discussing with many people, trying various different formats, reading about epics a lot, something that I liked and that I typically follow, that I ask my PMs and Scrum Masters to follow, is this. So basically today, most of my teams and other teams also at Big Basket, we follow this. Basically epic is, as you all know, it is a bigger goal that we want to achieve, probably at a release level. Typically epic don't go into multiple releases. Typically at a release level, what we want to achieve is covered in an epic, and if something needs to be covered in multiple releases, we typically call it as an uber epic, and probably that uber epic can be also put into this format. But in a particular release may contain, let's say, 5 sprints, 10 sprints, depending on how you define your releases. It can be in any format, right? So release definitely asks you to put the code into production, and whereas your sprint deliverable, which is an increment, may or may not go into production. And one more important thing is, you need not to wait for your increment to be completely ready to go into production. What that means is, for example, at Big Basket, we send code to production every alternate day. Actually, every day, depending on how things go. But typically, every alternate day, we ship code to production. So that means some small piece of code, either with a flag or which doesn't affect others, can go into production whenever they want. But what I'm trying to tell you is that increment should definitely be shippable. So it should be able to put into production if we want to. That is the quality assurance that we have to come up with when there is an increment. Right. So anyway, coming back to epic, so we have to define the motivation or goal. So as I was telling you, for example, in our case, when BB Now came up, and we had to put our Fresho stores a little behind, and then take up BB Now Epic. Then what is the motivation of BB Now? For example, the change in the market, how the numbers of Zomato app downloads increased, and how Blinkit is able to give certain better numbers compared to when they were growers, right? So depending on these reasons, these are the motivations for us to go with what we are calling as BB now. So problem statement, that quick commerce is the problem statement that we had to mention. Basically, I should be able to deliver the items within within a stipulated time. Like we may not be targeting 10 minutes, but if not 10 minutes, what is that, and why is that? And those things are problem statements. Then in the problem statement, we shouldn't be talking about the solution, because it is a problem statement, right? So we talk about the problem statement, and then the solution description, which is nothing but the business level description. Solution, not probably if it is a tech driven epic, the solution can be a tech driven solution as well, but typically the epics are coming from business, so the solution will be from the business side typically. And then when the definition, when the business will say that this epic is complete, that is what acceptance criteria or the DOD of it. I was talking about release DOD, right? This is what is that. And then optionally they may come up with the workflow or the architecture that they are looking for. For example, customer places an order, and then what happens within the 20 minutes if we have to deliver it back to customer, within 30 minutes if we have to deliver it to customer, what are the sequence of steps that has to happen, and what are the timelines that we are looking at for each of them. All those things can be drawn in a workflow and can be put it there as an epic, right? So yeah, that is about epic format that we follow. It's not a standard practice or anything, but this is something that I came up with after a lot of research discussions and my own practice, etc. And then user story, most of us already know. I think a lot of us write these stories already. So only thing that I have seen multiple times, and I can't stress enough on the importance of understanding the persona well. Lot of times people write as a developer, I want to do this. For example, as a developer, I want to let's say put this data into database so that I can retrieve when I want. That's absolutely not a user story, right? So we have to really understand that. Anybody know why do we have this as persona? I want to do something so that I can achieve something. I think you guys follow this already, right? So generally everyone follows this, but do we know why do we follow this? Why is user story has this format? And do you guys want to throw some light there?
In order not to miss the functionality what we are going to implement, or as well as if we come back after any day by watching the user story, we can get to know what we have done earlier on the functionality. So 2 points why we go with user story.
Yeah, so basically we want to emphasize that Agile is all about customer. And when we say that user story, user is nothing but the customer, and it is the customer journey that we are trying to automate, and hence the term that is coined is user story. So why a user story is in this format is because typically user story should be understandable by a dumb person, like they call it as 5-year-old, maybe too exaggeration, but then your user story when you write should be able to if you put it to a 5-year-old, he should be able to understand something out of it. That is the clarity with which you have to write user story. Because you know why? Because most of the times our customers are like that. Our customers are uh, not much aware of computers. It used to be in the case, at least in the past, but then still a lot of people, they don't understand the technology. So if you put a lot of um, context of the technology into user story, they will not be able to understand it, and hence if you are able to get me what I'm saying, why users have to understand it? Because we have to put it to them that this is what I am doing. Are we really putting this user story before customer and asking the customer whether they understood or not? Most of the times we don't, but we are actually supposed to show it to the customer about what we are developing by showing our story, showing what we wrote the story of him or her, right? So as a an employee, as a for example, it was really funny that at Red Hat, when we were working on developer analytics, I was talking to my team about user stories, etc. But unfortunately, our persona itself is developer, because we were writing as software for developers. So our thing was like as a developer only, right? So yeah, we used to write all our stories as a developer, but our persona itself was a developer who is developing some code on VS Code, for example. So yeah, so look at how you are writing user stories today, and is it the right way of doing it? Are you using the right users, right personas in your story? Again, only if you put the right persona, that's when you understand what we discussed here, right? Persona, empathy maps, as is to be, pain points, priorities, and only then you are actually solving the problem for that persona. So if you are writing some user story for yourself, it is not a user story, it's a developer story. It's not user story. User story should put the customer in that place as whoever, right? It is, and again, it is important to know that everything that we are talking here should be strictly followed. It is not the case, right? So for example, if let's say you are working on some non-functional requirements, right? For example, scalability, whatever that you are working on, encryption, and performance, etc. So certain pieces, you may be able to put persona there. For example, if it is about um, scalability, probably um, you may not be able to put the persona completely in there. So you may not have to follow this format strictly. In that particular case, you can put your story in such a way that the meaning is well put there, but it may not be in this format. So this format is strongly suggested, but you don't have to follow this format where it doesn't make sense. You don't have to force fit. Make sense?
So Shiva, as a persona, can I use the system itself? Like, for example, there is a product called Simplify 9. So sometimes for security vulnerabilities, I've written user stories where I've used the product itself as a persona because it would help the users to have a more secure feature.
You
or
can,
should it always be a customer or a client?
typically, the persona is either a user or a system component, right? Sometimes it could be, for example, another microservice in your entire system. That can be the other persona as well. But typically, I'd say don't try to force fit if it is not making sense to you to put it into this format. I mean, just don't go by that. No, I cannot do it. But think about it in the right way. So, for example, uh, if you see the performance, for example, there is a performance requirement that, let's say, 100 or let's say 10,000 customers should be able to search for the same keyword and should be able to get a response within 20 ms. For example, this is a performance related use case or a story that I have. Then will I be not able to put it into this format? Probably I can, right? As a customer, I want to search for Apple so that I can get my response back within whatever time, even though there are 10,000 other customers are doing it, searching at the same time, something like that. So make sure that you are putting it in there in such a way that it is understandable, meaningful, more than giving the preference to the entire format itself. So format is important, but getting that meaning out of it is far more important. Going back to the Agile Manifesto, right?
And also, I think the way you have put it, it reflects as to a customer value addition that ultimately it's about the customer and how that user story is helping improve that customer experience.
Absolutely. So that's where you have to think hard as to why I cannot put it into a customer persona, right? And at the end of it, in spite of trying or probably discussing with your colleagues, if you are still not able to put it in this format, don't force fit it. It's fine. It's fine. Don't worry too much about it. But then probably if you are in your first attempt itself, if you are not able to put it, probably you are doing something wrong. You may have to check with someone, discuss little more, think about it a little more. You'll be able to put it properly. Then it gives a lot of understanding for everyone in the Scrum team and outside of it as well.
Okay, thanks a lot, Shiva. That was helpful. So basically, whatever we do, trying to tie it up with some kind of value addition from the customer perspective.
Perfect. Yes. So a lot of us, we do estimations. Generally, Scrum Agile asks every one of us who are part of Scrum team should be part of estimation. So this is a little hard to understand, but it works. So it works, and probably it may not work well when we start the Scrum team, as in, but with few sprints, people will get to know, and it will work really well with respect to understanding what is the capacity of the Scrum, which is known as velocity of the Scrum team. So we either use days, or a lot of people use Fibonacci series as the story points. Some people use days themselves, and estimation is very, very important. That that helps you understand what is the size of the work that a Scrum team can take within a Scrum. within that 2 week or 3 week period, what is the size of the work that they can take. Depending on that, from the backlog, people will take only certain pieces of work and then move forward in that particular sprint. So you better get your estimations right so that you get the right amount of work rather than overloading yourself. So to start with, it may be little difficult. For example, newcomers or new developers, some freshers who joined may not know the entire complexity. They may give lesser story points versus more, etc. But don't eliminate them. Allow them to give the story points. Probably with the time, with the discussions, people will correct themselves, and then they become better at estimation. Estimation is the key, because that's what determines the size of the work that comes from the backlog to you for every sprint. All right, so a lot of these, I think we have already discussed. This is during the execution. Lot of times people don't update the status of the tickets that they work on. It is very, very important, because it keeps every stakeholder up to date with respect to what we are doing, how we are doing, and this keep an eye on the definition of done every time. Whatever you defined on definition of done, if you are during the execution, if you are not looking at your definition of done, then you are going to miss out on certain items that are mentioned in the definition of done, like, as I said, unit tests or whatever additional things that you have mentioned in your definition of done, right? Look at all the functional as well as non-functional requirements, and your quality requirements like coding standards, unit testing. You probably, some of you are using pretty tools to beautify your coding, etc., etc. So look at all of those and then implement those, right? So what is automatable versus what is not, and ideally you should have no defects, but even if there are defects, they should be known defects which are um, approved to be okay to live with. So then we are good there, right? Some of the metrics, like sprint burn down chart, um, release burn down chart, team velocity. We just talked about team velocity and how it helps with respect to what amount of work that you can take, etc. These are some of the high level metrics that will help the teams to get the right amount of work and the right amount of Scrum team as well. So I think I did not mention this, but typically it is 7 to 9 people is the right Scrum team size. But there are teams that work very well with 5 people or 11 people as well. But typically the recommendation is around 7 to 9 people in a Scrum team. All right, so that's all I have for today. So one quick